Mitsuki, the child of Orochimaru, and one of three of the only perfect sages alive in the Boruto world today. So unironically inheriting the title, or a form of a title, I guess you could say, as his parent, being a Sanin in some sort, because we only have Naruto, who we understand his current predicament, and we have Kashin Koji, and then we have this guy, Mitsuki. Three perfect sages, three sage mode users, and this guy, Mitsuki, has probably the most question marks, not just regarding his sage mode, but probably around his character. I believe Mitsuki is one of those characters where you either love him or you hate him. And I believe both the love and the hate stem from the same foundation, right? He was introduced as this very intriguing, mysterious character, child of Orochimaru. Orochimaru is one of the most beloved villains within Naruto's story. And then also you give this character a cracked sage mode that we've never seen before. Well, then of course the speculations and the expectations are going to be through the roof for this character, and rightfully so. A majority of the people introduced, especially through the Mitsuki one-shot, but definitely and very much so throughout the anime of Boruto Naruto Next Generations Part 1, we had high hopes for this guy, Mitsuki. Now, I believe the direction that this character has been taken, it's still very much true to its core and true to its essence, yet the misunderstanding for this guy, Mitsuki, is something that's actually, I can't say unfathomable, because it's easy to miss and it's easy to misread. So that much is very much understandable, I will say, in that regard. Now, I talked about Eida months ago in a previous character video, and I mentioned how her connection, her story, and actually the path that she is on currently as a character, in more ways than not, actually mirrors Mitsuki, right? And in TBV, we get very much a deeper understanding of this guy, Mitsuki, even more so than what the anime has ever done. Now, a lot of that love and hate, as I stated before, comes from the same place, essentially. When Mitsuki was introduced, everybody had high hopes for this character. Everybody had their own entire headcanon of how they perceived and believe his sage mode to be. And seeing slowly and surely as the sage mode unfolded, it is very underwhelming in a lot of the regards when you look at it. However, that's just mostly on the surface level, right? If we're just simply looking at power scaling, simply looking at, oh, did we get any instances or moments where he completely overpowers someone or overwhelms someone, or he just aura farms? Anytime he uses the sage mode, it looks pretty, it looks nice, but we got into a point, especially within TBV, where people look at Mitsuki's sage mode as probably just like another shuriken or kunai type jutsu. Like, it's there, but is it really gonna do anything, you know? And I believe, like I said, that is a justifiable reason and justifiable thought and conclusion to come to. However, if you want to go deeper into the character, it's more than just cool battle moments and being probably one of the strongest characters in the story. Now, at the start and the beginning, I believe that's possibly a path that we could have saw Mitsuki, yet I always believe it was intended for his character to take a more philosophical route, and the fact that the power that comes from battle shonen and just him being one of the main characters on a main team, he's inevitably going to be strong. He's inevitably going to have strong and cool moments. Yet, I believe his stardom and his shine won't necessarily come for those moments, as we see in moments where he's battling Ryu, as we see in moments where at the end in the Omnipotence arc where he's chasing Boruto, he's activating Sage Mode, he's doing all of these things, yet he's not necessarily overstepping his boundary, especially as a character within these moments. So then we have to look at other areas. If it's not going to be battle-wise, when it comes to Mitsuki, if he's going to shine, being the child of Orochimaru, having the only perfect Sage Mode out of 3 other users in this world, well, where is he really going to shine? And we have to see how he was introduced and how the anime and both the manga differ from this character, but also build upon this character within the continuation within Two Blue Vortex. So Mitsuki's stardom, right? No pun intended when we talk about the constellations, because we know he represents the moon and he's searching for his son. He spent his life searching for his son and believes Boruto is his son, right? In a non-omnipotence world. Yet we understand Mitsuki's stardom should essentially come from a philosophical standpoint. It should come from a characterization standpoint, right? He's one of those characters where I believe his big moments don't necessarily should or will come from the battlefield, but more so within the story, within the context, within realizations, within plot points being unfolded or turning or just being unrevealed in certain manners and certain ways. So as I stated, a lot lot of his story mirrors and parallels Eida, and we understand how important Eida is into the story, especially upon her introduction, right? So before we jump into the Eida connection with Mitsuki, let's look at basically what the anime has done to him and how a lot of misunderstandings come from basically the manga doing or reiterating the same thing for Mitsuki as a character, when essentially that isn't the case. Now, the anime introduced the concept and the idea of Mitsuki having a son, of Mitsuki coming across the idea and belief that was he coerced or was he manipulated into believing that the idea of having a son was something that he needed. And we see that in the Mitsuki retrieval arc was something that he struggled with and thought about heavily until he finally came to the conclusion and realization that not only does he himself want a son, regardless of whatever Orochimaru or Log may have done, implied that file inside of his mind, implied the seeds inside of his head that he needs to find a son, and that son needs to be Boruto. He believed with all his heart that he's gonna follow that will regardless of if someone wants him to or not. And also on top of that, just because he believes he should follow that will, that doesn't mean he has to do everything Boruto does. And we've seen throughout that arc, he started to slowly become his own self, making choices not just the same that Boruto made, but more so on a stance or a stance where he thought it through and he believed personally this is the path that he wanted to go. And he's mentioned time and time again in the anime, maybe at first he would have done things simply because Boruto does them, but now he's doing things because this is what he wants to do. So the anime takes Mitsuki through this arc where he has an identity crisis, right? Because he believes the thing he's been fighting for or believing in isn't something necessarily real, or I guess you could say superficial or artificial. But then he comes to the conclusion, no, this is something that he chooses to believe in. And it's the fact that he has that freedom of choice that he ultimately decides this is what's going to become his will. And we see in TBV, he isn't necessarily struggling with that same concept or idea. He's more so struggling with the eternal belief and memory of his son being in Kawaki at this point in time, and the contradicting factors that are being befolded before his eyes. He remembers Kawaki as basically we remember Boruto from part 1. And just imagine within the last 3 years, and especially upon the introduction of TBV, Kawaki's actions, Kawaki's mannerisms, everything Kawaki says or do, how that contradicts Mitsuki's ultimate internal feelings and how he believes and remembers his son to be. So when he has that internal conflict and confrontation with Boruto and comes to the understanding that Boruto actually might be his son, instead of hammering home the same ideas that the anime already did, where okay, Mitsuki learns to think on his own and be on his own, yet he still wants to basically be the moon that illuminates the night and shines and basically reflects from what the sun ultimately does. Yet Boruto tells him, you can still shine on your own. If anything, if you need a son, you can be your own son, right? However, if you decide that I should be a son or I should still be that son for you, come and find me. I'm always gonna accept you. So basically, Boruto welcomes Mitsuki with open arms, yet rejects him at the same time, but rejecting him from a place of love that tells him, bro, I've seen you shine on your own. You can shine on your own. And the things that you do, yes, they can reflect a bigger picture and help someone else's light shine even brighter. So I can be that light for you. However, from my perspective and from my point of view, I see that light within you as well. And that was the first time ever that type of seed was planted within Mitsuki. And we see that ultimately stem to the conversation that he had with Eida. So when we open up in TBV, we spend a lot of the early chapters with this guy, Mitsuki. And I believe what the early chapters are doing for this character is establishing early on, right? And developing Mitsuki's character in a point that builds off of everything he's learned in the anime. Because essentially, because of Omnipotence, everything that he did learn in the anime, because of how Kawaki acts and because of how Mitsuki is, believing that Kawaki is Boruto, everything that he valued and learned essentially can be seen as thrown away or can be seen as trash and irrelevant because nothing is making sense before his eyes. Yet things suddenly start to click when this guy Boruto shows up. Now Boruto presented this idea and TBV is going to take it a step further. Yes, you were independent. Yes, you chose on your own will to protect your son and to fight for your son. Now decide upon whether you believe that there can even be a path where possibly your son goes down and you know for a fact you cannot follow down that path. Now granted, his original son has always and will always be Boruto, but in the Omnipotence world where he starts to see that quote unquote son in Kawaki deteriorate or go down a different path, well, is he gonna delude or manipulate manipulate his own self into believing he's going to blindly follow this guy Kawaki, or is he really going to contemplate and think on, well, what made me believe this guy was my son in the first place? What are those attributes and traits that drawn me towards him originally, and why is he abandoning them? And what can I do ultimately to not just necessarily follow him blindly, but to reel him back in? Now, granted, this isn't the path to take for Mitsuki, because it's not as if Boruto himself is derailing, but more so these thoughts can stem and start to bubble to the surface because of the difference he has in seeing between both Boruto and Kawaki. And then meeting Boruto for the first time in a long time ultimately confirms all of these suspicions, which leads down the domino effect in the road of Mitsuki freeing Boruto from the interrogation, listening to Shikamaru's orders, and going on into the Sand mission and pleading and consulting with Konohamaru in order to go help Boruto take down Juro. All of these things slowly lead to Mitsuki piecing all of the puzzles inside of his brain and inside of his mind together to where he possibly believes or understands, yes, it's a bigger picture than me right now. It's even bigger than me thinking, do I want Boruto or Kawaki to be my son, or should I even be my own son? It's the fact that I can contemplate with these feelings and thoughts to where now I understand I need to do what I believe and feel is best and is right. And for some reason, this guy interacting with this guy Boruto stemmed up these old memories and feelings of how I used to feel about this guy Kawaki, and why I even decided to follow Kawaki in the first place. Now, Mitsuki has more development to undergo, and they have to basically dwell and expand upon that whole entire idea of, well, Mitsuki will settle for the fact that, okay, he's gonna decide and have an inner conflict and war with himself between Boruto or Kawaki being his son, yet will he really entertain the idea of, wait, he can be his own son? And we see that with the conversation with Eida. Now, as I talked about previously with Eida's video, they had a conversation about basically superficial feelings, basically prioritizing or valuing your life based off of one feeling that necessarily shouldn't be the center or core of your existence. And Mitsuki brought this idea up, and he basically said Eida isn't in love with Kawaki, rather she's in love with the idea of Kawaki. And in turn, Mitsuki thus reflecting those feelings on himself, but more so trying to focus on Eida within that conversation, but reflecting those feelings on himself, right? It's not that he really values or views whether it be both Boruto or Kawaki as a son, but it's the fact that the concept or idea of a son is something that Mitsuki needs in order to live in this world, or in order to continue to move forward, right? But then he also tackles the idea with Eida, where it's like, this is the point where the two are so alike. They are heavily reliant on some third party or outward source to validate their existence or validate their life that they are living, whereas that validation should actually come from themselves first. And if it does come from within themselves, then and only then can they express that validation or those feelings and emotions upon others and those around them. And it's crazy and it's interesting how it took all of this time for Mitsuki to come to that realization, but his conversation with Eida is something that helped him grow to this understanding. And he shows true appreciation, not just from her ability, but from the fact that he's a created human being. And because of Eida, he's able to experience these feelings of love and emotion, and he wants to express himself towards her. So it's like a double-edged sword, right? He's trying to help her, and in the midst of helping her, he's reflecting and projecting not only those feelings from her onto himself, but also the gratitude and thankfulness for just being able to feel the way that he even does in the moment, right? He feels affectionate towards her, and he wants to reveal these things towards Eida. So a lot of sub meanings, but the overall meaning within that main conversation is the idea of self-realization and self-love in a much deeper and more intricate understanding for both characters, two different angles, two different alleys and avenues, where Eida, it's more so love in a romantic sense. Is she valuing the idea of love or the person that she's pursuing within that love? And Mitsuki is more so a loyalty in a faithful sense. Is he valuing the idea of a son, or quote unquote that friendship or relationship, or is he valuing the idea of Boruto or Kawaki being that son or that valued friendship or relationship? So it's really deeper when it comes to both of these characters, and TBV done an amazing job early on, not only showing what they want to develop with this guy Mitsuki as a character, but the parallels to such an important character in Eida, and ultimately stem the belief for me that his important moments aren't just gonna be major big battle shonen moments. And of course, I want to see Sage Mode go crazy, especially in the near future. But definitely, I believe the characterization of this guy Mitsuki. I think he has a lot of understanding of himself to do, And I believe that TBV has set him up on the right path in order to do so, in order to build his character even further. And I believe because of these parallels with Eida, right? Y'all know I'm not the biggest shipper in the world, but I do believe that we might get a deeper connection between both Eida and Mitsuki as a character, and whether that leads into a future with the two, who knows? Yet I will call it here. I think there is a deeper meaning between these two characters, one, but I also believe with all my heart, Mitsuki as a character will grow out of the idea, kind of like a flower blooming, right? Of needing to be a moon that reflects the sunlight, rather than being a moon that illuminates the night light on its own, because the moon still has to shine regardless of whatever way you want to look at it. So let me know how y'all feel about it, and what do y'all think ultimately about this guy Mitsuki. As a character, I believe he is very intriguing and important, aside from just battle, aside from just sage mode and cool moments, which we all want to see, which y'all know I want to see. I do believe characterization and definitely parallels between him and Eida is something that Ikimoto might be keeping his eye out for. So let me know how y'all feel about it, and what are y'all thoughts. It's your boy Black Child. Holla at your boy. I'm holla at y'all. Black Child. Yes, sir. Ski.